coming to kill her.
Welcome, Radical Ones, to the Radical Retro Rewind podcast. I am your host, Ryan Hunter, as always. Today, we are continuing summer camp with Friday the 13th, Part 3, and I have a very special guest today to help me discuss this film. He's an accomplished writer and a graduate of Miami University's creative writing, and one of the biggest horror fans I know, Mr. Mark Anthony Brownlee. Thank you so much for being here. I know him as Anthony.
That's all good. I said typically the only person that calls you Mark Anthony is my mom, but it's all good. All good.
Anthony, I'm so excited to have you. Like I said, not only are you a huge horror fan, but you are an author. You have written 10 books and currently have 6 of them published. Do you want to just give a little history of where you began, your inspiration?
Writing for me started at a really young age, as early as I'd say 7 or 8. And of course, back then it was mostly just like little short stories, just little things, kind of like, things I would see on TV or in life, and just try to make my own through that. But what really got me into stories was actually watching the original Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 5. I was shown that film when I was 5 years old, and I fell in love with that story, mostly because it scared the holy crap out of me at that.
I could only imagine.
As afraid as I was of that film, I constantly kept watching that film because it was like magnetic. It just kept drawing me back to it, even though I would have nightmares about it. And as I got older and I really started, wanting to know if I can actually write a story, on a book level, like I didn't get to that point until I was about 20 years old. So in the back of my mind, and it's kind of funny because I had heard this saying before. This was a saying that I heard Will Smith say once. Him, in the 90s when he would do his, music and things like that. He always said that Thriller was like his all-time favorite, and in the back of his mind, he's always chasing Thriller. And I kind of didn't get by that at first, that statement he made. But then I got it later because I'm constantly chasing after Nightmare as I write, because that was the first story that scared me and the first story that I truly love. That when I write stories, I'm seeking that particular high in the horror genre, to get a reaction from other people how I felt about that film, but through my own writing.
I love that. And I feel like people don't give horror movies... I mean, nowadays things are turning around.
Yeah.
But usually people don't think of horror movies like this. But man, if they don't inspire people, and clearly, look at you here all these books later, my God. There's something about the horror genre, I feel like, that not only has great people as fans...
Yeah.
But there's a sense of community, and Anthony, you have pretty much met everybody. I mean, if you see Anthony's Instagram page, especially if you are a horror fan, a movie fan, I mean, you've met like broad spectrum of genres, but horror-wise, oh my God, Anthony, you've met everyone.
I started going to horror conventions in 2007, and I have been going faithfully for 12 years up until the pandemic started. Unfortunately, I had gone through since 2007. I have always been at a convention, and at my peak, like right in the middle there, between maybe like 2013 and 2015, I could have easily have done about 5 cons a year. Just yeah, and I was just going everywhere that I could just go. I mean, I've gone as close as here home in in Cincinnati, and as far as California to a con. So it's just been a wild ride. And like what you said earlier about community, I've met like some of the greatest people in my life at horror cons, because as a kid, like I was like that kid that was, I had like 0 friends, and my mind was always in the clouds because I just had this dreaming, kind of creative mind. And when I go home, I just turn on horror movies, and so those became friends. Basically, were horror movies. And when you go to these horror cons, you realize that you weren't the only one that felt like that, or not even just the cons, but in the horror community in general. That you're not the only one that felt like that, and it's just like wow, like and it's like, man, I've really found my people. Like it's like they're just like some of the greatest people like I will like ever know. So it's been really good.
And you saying that, Anthony, I love that because people will think of horror and they'll say, oh, these people love just people getting tortured or killed. And that's not even half of really
Right,
what it is. I mean, it's the stories, these challenges, these
Mhm.
heroines, especially even in this series that we've been focusing
Right.
on. I think they're
Me too.
inspiring.
Definitely. They are definitely. I mean, and that's the main thing I love about writing. I love creating these worlds, taking my hero or my heroine, because I actually do both now, and, putting them basically through the ringer. But always looked at horror films as like somebody rising to the occasion to become a hero or a heroine. Not that they set out to be, not that
Yes.
they want the glory or the gratification. They just do what they have to do. And I think Wes Craven put it best to Heather Langenkamp when he said it wasn't that Nancy Thompson was fearless, she was afraid. There is a huge fear factor in, what she was going through, but she knew that there was more than fear at play and had to kind of rise above it, or, in a sense, take the fear along with everything else, and but still just go forward to make sure she survived at the end of the day, basically. And that's how I look at horror films.
And speaking of Heather and Nancy, Anthony is a friend of Heather. I mean, you've met her how many times? I mean, she's the inspiration behind one of your books as
Oh yeah,
well.
she definitely is. My book, well, it's actually my first thriller book that I ever wrote. I attempted to write a thriller, which she actually had me. She gave it to me as an assignment in 2013. It was like 'cause I used to write a little bit differently with like screenplay and prose combined. Which prose, people don't know, prose
Yes.
is just basically the traditional way. But I would combine the two because I loved film and I loved writing. So I was like, let me like really combine these. And she pretty much has every book that I've ever written. And when she saw that, she's like, I want you to write me a book, just traditional prose. I want it to be between 150 to 200 pages, and I'm going to give you 2 years to write it. And I was like, okay. She's like, I really think you'll have a lot of success with just the prose writing. And so I was able to hand her that book literally one day off, almost 2 years to that day at another convention.
That is amazing, Anthony. So can we get her to star in a movie adaptation of one of your
Look, every time
books?
I write one, I'm feeling like she would be perfect for this role, for this character. All my heroines and even my heroes, they all have to have a little bit of Nancy Thompson in them. So no, they're like, my characters are 100% original, but at least 2%, 3% Nancy Thompson. Like, she's got to be in there somewhere, because to me, she's the epitome of what a heroine should be.
I love it. You heard it here, folks. Do you see what horror could do for you? I mean, not only is it the community, these uplifting hero stories. And you're right, these people that don't even choose to be put in this
Right.
situation a lot of the times.
It's life. Life can be scary, and because people always say, well, why does it have to be horror? I say, because some things in life are scary. Like, they don't necessarily have to be supernaturally
Yes.
scary. It could be as scary as losing a loved one, or not knowing where your next meal is going to
Yes.
come from, or I mean, the kid that goes to school and is afraid because he's being bullied. I mean, that horror, that those are different types of horror that people just don't think about. So that's a lot of my inspiration behind some of that, because I went through a lot of that stuff. So
When you go through these things to be able to write it down and use it in stories like this, it's nice to have you've gotten through it and now you can write a story with similar beats of what's happened to even in your life.
right.
So I love writers. I'm so fascinated by people who can write, and I love it. Friday the 13th, part 3. What is it about this one, Anthony, that when you saw it, set it apart from the others? Off camera before we recorded, you did mention it was in one of your top 5 horror movies of all
Yes,
time.
it is. That film, and I still remember when I first saw it. Well, saw it, I guess, say when I saw it fully. So I remember being a kid, and back in the day, TV, USA Up All Night and Monster Vision,
Yes, USA.
And so I remember catching part three, like parts of it. Like I remember mostly like the beginning, and then as a kid you might have changed the channel to another horror film, and then maybe came back, and then it just kind of slips you, however it did. But I really saw the entire thing when I was about 12 years old. So this would have been around 98. I actually had my grandmother record. There was a mini marathon of Friday the 13th coming on because it was Friday the 13th, and I think they were doing the first 4 or first 5 movies, and he was able to record the first 4 for me, which I was cool with. And then obviously in between that was part 3, and I had seen part 1 times, part 2, and part 4, but somehow part 3 had just kind of eluded me a little bit. And when I finally caught it, the whole thing, I was like, man, I said, what is it about this? It was just something I just kept. That was the one I just kept watching the most. I always rewinded this, recorded, VHS with commercials, and it was edited to hell, like like. But I didn't even know it was edited that bad, being on TV, because I had never seen the thing in its entirety before. So it wasn't until 2 years later, when I was 14, I actually finally got it on VHS. And when I saw it on VHS, it was like watching the movie for the first time all over again, because they had cut out so much stuff in this version.
I can't imagine what they put on TV, like the TV cut. It's probably like...
I think if I still had that recorded VHS somewhere, just to like have a VCR put that in. Oh man, I mean, they cut out all the stuff with Chili and Chuck, so you never even see those characters until Chris almost runs over the old kind of vagabond in the road, because they cut out the whole smoking scene and all that. All that was cut out completely. I never saw that until I got the VHS, so I never knew that even existed.
Like, who are these 2 people that just came out of this van?
Oh man, I mean, of course, the Run of the Death scenes were all cut down. So those I expected to be cut down, but just those little scenes in between that I just had no idea that were that weren't there. And I was just like, wow, like and then it was just when I got it on VHS, I watched it almost every day. I remember being in the 8th grade around that time, and I remember being in homeroom at one point, just thinking about it. Like, no, it wasn't homeroom. It was English class. It was English class, because it was like about maybe like 12:30, 1:30 in the afternoon. I just kept saying, man, I can't wait to get home so I can watch this movie again. Just sitting there thinking about it as the teacher went over like the lessons. I'm just like, that's how I knew I just really connected with Friday the 13th Part 3. There's just so much to it.
You're right, they become your friends, because that was Dawn of the Dead for me. I would be in 9th grade too, and I'm writing, what if they flew off in the helicopter, and where did they go? And like, I want to watch it again. And I remember I could just rewatch a movie over and over. It's like one of those, literally the next day, like, you know what? It's a Saturday. I'm not doing anything. Let's watch those friends again. Let's see this adventure.
Oh man, it is. Those are like some of the best times. Even just thinking about those. I felt like there was like such an innocence in the 90s or something that was just, I think because it was just like kind of like my birth of just really getting into horror films, and it just always makes me think about that time. Like, just when I was really getting into, horror films. Because I'm always so thankful I was in that era where they had, Monster Vision and USA Up All Night. You got to see like the pure 80s horror films that, there's no way they like show those on TV now. It's either you have to have the physical media or you have to have some sort of streaming service, and I'm still very much a physical media person. So
I agree. There's nothing that beats like a physical media, knowing you have it. It's not going to be lost, like you said. Like, they'll probably show Friday the 13th, but around Halloween, if anything, right? I mean, USA All Night. Oh my god, I love that, Anthony. That is bringing me back. We did live in an innocent time, I feel like, growing up in the 90s, like we did.
I mean, they kind of felt like my, the 80s for me, even though, nothing can really touch the 80s, but they would show so much 80s stuff. It just felt like, I was kind of like living in the second hand of 80s or something.
I think we were. I think the 90s was like 80s light.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it had like remnants of what was cool about the 80s.
Yeah.
And then 2000s came, and then just whoop.
Oh, yeah, it was gone. Like, as soon as 2000s hit, it was like, it snatched it all away.
And there goes the innocence.
Yes.
And now we're here in 2021.
Oh man, it was like a million years ago now. It's Oh, that's so crazy.
I mean, they make modern remakes, of course, of things, but there's these charms to these 80s slasher movies, and that cannot be replicated at all,
No, they
unfortunately.
can't. And it's like they produce like some of the just most like unique characters that just when I think about it, because going back to my books a little bit. So when I write, I always in my head I'm always thinking about that time, and like I love writing slasher horror novels, but I like to call my horrors dramatic horrors, like give a little bit of that
Ooh.
sophistication on them a little bit, to like that there's in between the horror, it's somebody's life, the regular things that they're doing, and that's what you are introduced to when you're watching these horror movies, just somebody just living their
Right.
best life in a sense, and all of a sudden this horror element comes in. And when it came to like Friday 3, what I loved about it was, well, one was Chris Higgins, played by Dana Kimmel. She is my favorite heroine of the entire franchise.
I wrote that down to ask you because I remembered a while ago you had mentioned that, and I'm like, is it Chris? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
Chris. And then when you said part 3 was your favorite, I was like, okay, I think it is Chris. So Chris Higgins, what is it about Chris? Is it her backstory? Is it how she deals with everything? Is it both? Is it the actress?
I think it's a like combination of all of that, really. She was just such a unique entry and a unique character, especially when you find out that there's like this, like I said, this backstory with her and Jason that that happens between, because if you watch part 2 after Alice is killed, there's that 5-year jump. So in between that bright light popping up, this happened to Chris Higgins, and it's
Yes.
kind of like why did he specifically target her? Why, when she talked about how she blacked out, that she just woke up in her own bed? Like, why was she not killed? There's such this
Yes.
mystery about her. And another thing I love about her is that pretty much in the entire Paramount franchise of the or I guess say sector of Friday the 13th, she's the only brunette. Every other girl is a blonde.
They definitely have a blonde final girl thing going. Yeah. You're
She was like the
right.
only brunette that ever came through, and I was like, I just remember one day that it hit me, like, man, she's the only like brunette girl in here, and she had such an innocence about her, like, because to me, Dana Kimmel, like, she's like gorgeous, like she's just a gorgeous, woman, like in that film, she just had
Yes.
like this innocence about her, and just you know, she reminded me a little bit of Nancy Thompson, a little bit for something, like she,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that.
Something about
Yes.
her, I just, kind of correlates with Nancy a little bit to me, because Chris is actually in my, not only is, Friday the 13th Part 3 in my top 5 horror movies, but Chris Higgins is in my top 5 heroines. It's like, because she, to me, like, just the things that she did. Because, a lot of times, Needs, it was always, the girl and the guy, when they were surviving, and, but
Yes.
I felt like she was really the first, like, one that really took on Jason like alone. Then kind of had Paul kind of intervene a little bit, and and all that, but she was complete because Rick is killed, and she's pretty much on her own, just running through the woods and just managing to slip away.
So good. I mean, even when later on, Anthony, when she's back in the cabin and she breaks the
Mhm.
window and is like
Oh
holding on
yeah.
to like slide down to, I mean, she's
Yeah,
fantastic.
she did. I feel like she did a lot. Really a lot. With her, time in the film, and just learning about her more and more. Just I just always wish that they had brought her back for another one, just to really like dive back into that story of like or the backstory of like Jason and her, and what that kind of meant, and I just thought it always would have been really interesting, to do that. That's why I've always been really interested in like modern day sequels as opposed to, remakes.
Yes. Like the Laurie Strode almost in the
Right,
Halloween, that you can continue the
right.
story and kind of forget about the other
Hmm.
sequels and that may have
Right.
happened.
Like, I just think it's interesting.
Chris would have then, to your point, Anthony, would have faced Jason twice at that
Right,
point and then
right.
survived.
Typically, with a lot of these, like, what always got me about the Friday the 13th franchise is that most of the time it was almost like a one and done for everybody. Like, Jenny was there the one time, Chris was there, and Trish, but then, you had a few people come back, like, Alice came back for part 2, but, unfortunately knocked off so soon. But then you had Tommy Jarvis, who was like not only in one, but, 3 sequels, character wise. But other than that, it was almost like a one and done for everybody. Going into part 7, it was just Tina Shepard, Law, and just was kind of unique.
Would you group the first three almost in their own world? Because they kind of, part one, like you were saying, we get Alice in the beginning of part two to carry that over. And then in this one, they end up showing the last scene of part
Right.
two. They kind of like change it a little to
Mhm.
show that. But I like that they kind of carry on and they show then Ginny in the news that she survived. And, you know, they kind of do that thing with the, oh, we found 8
Mhm.
bodies. I feel like the first three just seamlessly follow this story really
Yeah,
well.
I definitely feel like that. There was something really good about those first original ones, because even like going after part 3, like, you know, it carries right on into part 4, where now it's like the night after, just like bam, 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 and then like, you know, then they bring in Rob part 4, who's talking about his sister Sandra from part 2, you know, and it's just, you know, I said that was like, I had never seen a film series like that, where it just, you know, might have one where it can, like, you know, Halloween 1 and 2 are connected. Hellraiser 1 and 2 where it kind of picks up right where it left off, but this one, it's just like 3 films back to back that just pick up right where they left off. I said that's so different, you know.
As a matter of fact, right in part 4, doesn't it pick up? He's like in the barn where they just left him in this
Right.
one. They just left his body
Right.
drove away with Chris.
Right, he still got like the axe in his like head where like she chops it, and that's another thing I love about Chris. She is the only one that left that permanent mark on him, because after she hits him in that axe, that mark on his mask is in every single sequel after that, and I'll always.
You know, I didn't even think of that, Anthony. That's
She left a
right.
permanent mark on her. Every time I see that, I said Chris Higgins did that. Like, you know?
She left her stamp. Is Jason a live human being at this point? So Chris, you know, basically hangs him for a moment in this, and he's able to survive that as well. So is he a man at this point that just so happens to have this body that's super strong? Would you say Jason is a man right now, or is he an entity? Is there something with the Crystal Lake that we see him being the boy in the first? Was it real? Crystal Lake, is it a curse? That's a lot of questions, I know. Digest that however.
I won't. I mean, I have always, because, you know, people always say, oh, well, Jason, you know, and micro artists, and, you know, they're always walking after their victims. I said, you know, Jason ran in the beginning, and I always felt that he was human, but kind of felt like he was just, you know, maybe a little bit more superhuman. Not necessarily, trying to think of the best way to describe it. Not like a demon in a sense, but just something a little bit otherworldly that, you know, maybe there is kind of a curse on Crystal Lake, and he was still kind of, you know, human form, but, you know, a little bit of extra to him because he's got the Voorhees blood in him, or, you know, something like that, and you know.
They're very tough, I know. Pamela out there.
Right, you know. So like, and that's another reason I wish they kind of really, you know, kind of brought in the Elias Voorhees character, just to really kind of see, because he's really like the true carrier of this Voorhees line, and like, you know, what is it about him that, you know, so there's still like a little mystery like surrounding Jason. So, you know, I mean, that's what prequel films are always the best for, is just having that little extra to him about that, to do that. So I actually felt like he really was dead. Like, he was dead after part 4. Tommy, you know, and I always say it was so funny because Tommy Jarvis was responsible for killing him, and then ultimately responsible for making him this unstoppable force forever.
That is so crazy.
It's like crazy ironic. Like the epitome of like irony. Like, you know.
This series, I feel like they always end on these head twisting. Did it happen? Did it really happen? Are they really in the canoe at the end?
Because that's what happened to Chris. Like, you know, she, you know, they show her kind of going a little bit crazy at the end, and, you know, just like after everything she went through, and, you know, I mean, I always like to, you know, believe, you know, maybe just kind of went through her little bout for a little bit, but then recovered, and, you know, so that, you know, for her character, because I felt like she was a really strong character, and I just thought that the way that they had Jason in this, just because, and then that's why I really thought it would have been good just to really go into her story more, like, you know, that, you know, thing with her and Jason.
Yeah, because that's pretty, I mean, it was traumatic for her. There's parts of her that she thinks that she might have imagined it. Have you heard this, Anthony? There's a theory that her trauma and the fact that she doesn't want to be intimate with Rick is due to associating this with a sexual assault as well?
I actually have heard that where people have said, that he do something to her, like while, that was why he left her alive. Like maybe he was, attracted to her. Because I've heard, certain things that were deleted from or I guess not really not deleted, but omitted from like, the script. 'Cause there actually
Oh,
was a scene, well, when her and Rick are talking about how she's talking about what happened to her, and how her and Rick were
yes.
hanging out that night. She gets dropped off back home and has that fight with her parents. It was actually Dana Kimmel who actually went to Steve Miner and said, "How about we take this part out where we talk about how Chris and Rick made love for the first time?" And she had wanted that omitted,
Oh,
and I actually thought that actually made it a little bit more interesting, especially that fact about the whole sexual component that,
yes.
Jason might have had. Like, we know why would he, after what happened, he would know this place. He would
That's
know Higgins Haven, like with her being there. So he waiting for her?
yes.
Was did he kind of circle around every so often to see if she would come back? Or, always certain things I always thought about that, this film. Like, was he really like after her to try to kill her, or is just all these little different things that I thought were really interesting that, and I've heard other people kind of say that throughout the years too. And so I was like, I'm glad I'm not the only one that's like, kind of thinking, kind of going outside the box here.
Because it wouldn't be, I guess, the normal Jason
Right.
MO, but what else could explain? I don't know. I mean, I guess trauma. I know, God forbid, I never want
Right.
this to happen. This, be attacked
Right.
by someone in the woods. But I mean, I guess trauma could make you. But yeah, she woke up in her bed, doesn't remember how she got home, and that apprehensive to be with Rick. Although I gotta tell you, Anthony, I think Rick is one of the most unlikable male characters in this franchise. I don't know why. I don't like Rick.
Oh man, I always thought Rick was kind of cool. This seemed like he was like, I always kind of just felt like he was one of those like, a little bit like those all shucks kind of guys, like, especially when they,
Okay, like a farm
yeah,
boy or something
yeah,
like
because
that.
they talk about that scene where, he's like, I gave up a weekend to spend with Mary Jo Conrad,
Yeah.
so it kind of show. I mean, because I mean, honestly, he could have just like, kind of just said F it and like, I'm gonna, hang out with Mary Jo Conrad, but he chose Chris. Like he really wanted, to be with Chris. Like, you could always tell that there was just something about her that he was just in love with, but she just wouldn't let him in. Like he even said that he said, I don't see you for long. He said, when I do see
Yeah.
you, put this barrier up. Like, it's like he's trying to love her, but she's keeping him at arm's length. And I feel like it's because of this whole thing with Jason. And maybe yeah,
Definitely. Oh, but see, now you make me like him a little better. Okay, okay, I get him a little more. He does know how to use farm equipment. He throws
yeah,
the hay really good, and he lifts her up on the pulley.
right.
So Rick. Other characters that are pretty well known from this entry: Shelly, annoying or misunderstood?
A little bit of both. I mean, I actually know people like Shelly, like, guys and girls that, are trying to get attention and, and it could be because, they don't really get
Yeah.
attention from anywhere else and they don't know how else to be. They don't
Yes.
mean any harm. It's just how they, I guess, in a sense, kind of, represent themselves or, uh, just something about them that, this is the only way I can communicate with you. Like I said, I was bullied in school, like literally from third to 12th grade. I was just bullied. And
Oh
so I know
God.
how, just kind of being isolated and not really having anybody to talk to. And you kind of like do things to maybe stand out sometimes and it just kind of falls flat because nobody really wants to be around you or you're not on their level. And so in those regards, I kind of relate to Shelly. I mean, but I did see, some of the, annoying tendencies. Like, okay, well, you scared us the first, okay, and then you're taking it a little bit too far with some of this stuff, But it was that moment with him and Vera when he, said, I
Yes.
really like you, and like, she's just kind of like, she's really trying to like let him down like really easy, and if you just really watch his face, it's kind of like, oh man, like you just feel really bad. Like you just feel really bad for him. He's just like, man. And then like, when he scares her again and and she's like, she's getting really pissed off at him and he's like, "I want you to
Yes.
like me." Like, and that's his way, So and so in many ways I felt really, sad for Shelly, But like I said, it was a combination of both things. But they were like young. I always felt like they were young, like 19, 20, 21 year old.
Yes, right. You get
Yeah,
that sense, right? That they're probably
yeah,
20s,
yeah. They're a little bit
young.
older. Like I felt like they were more like college. Because I think there was a line where Andy, says to Cheryl, like, you're my roommate, and I like you. So it makes me think
Yes.
like they're living off campus or something in like a little like cheap apartment or something. And so, but even though they're in that young bracket, they're still immature, like still growing, still figuring out who they are. And I always figured like a character like Shelly, they eventually find their way.
Yeah, that's why I feel bad that he does get this rep. I've noticed that he really gets this hated for this episode. Either, like you said, people really like him or they
Yeah,
hate him.
I really liked him. I really liked him. Like I said, because I can relate to him a little bit on some of those levels. I feel like everybody can. Like I feel like
Oh,
you
definitely.
have people. I mean, I felt like there were more people in school that felt like outcasts than people who felt like that they were like the popular kids, or they, even though some of them don't want to admit it. So, they might try to pretend like, oh, well, my high school days were good. But they're not telling you about, this thing that happened to them, and because they want to kind of project this image to you that oh, I'm good, everything was good, I'm good.
Yes.
So I really feel like more people can relate, and the people who like really feel like oh, he's an idiot, those are like really the guys that probably were more annoying than the character of Shelly. You know
Amen.
what I
That's
mean?
right. And I like that he's included with this
Right.
group. I like that he's just out of all of them, he would be the nerdy, geeky. So he would be this character that would be
Hmm.
ridiculed. So I like that he was included with this. Unfortunately, it led them all to
Right.
death, but
Right.
he does give us the
Yes.
hockey mask, though. So
Exactly.
I mean, if it wasn't for
Right.
Shelley, where
Where
would
would we
Jason
be?
be?
Right. It could have been anything. So that's just say so part three gave us a lot of like a little bit of everything. Like, so like that's just like another reason why I love it. It's just something a little bit different. I mean, plus when they came out with the game a few years ago, the Friday the 13th game, like Higgins Haven is like the
Yes.
basically the foundation of the game. That's where they are. Like, they could have picked anywhere, like, in Camp Crystal Lake, but they chose Higgins Haven. So I just thought that was, really cool.
So before I forget, this was the 3D entry in the series as well. That's
Oh
why
yeah.
we get the eyeball, the
Hmm.
pole, and these various kills. The snake with the
Yeah.
string attached to it.
Right. It's like, oh, ladies. It's like, we love you.
But I totally, I do. I love every minute of it. Another character I really like is Vera. You mentioned
Hmm.
her, and I do think that she is really likable.
Yeah, I really liked Vera. And then the fact that, she was Hispanic, from what I could tell, when Hispanic
Yes,
was.
her mother should have never let her
Right.
go. Like they.
You know, she told her not to go, and then she did it. Like, I mean, I love, because I love diversity. Like, I mean, like I said, I love the slasher era. I just wish there could have been, more diversity. I wish you could have had like, some black female heroines, some, Hispanic heroines, Asian
Yes.
heroines, anything that could have made. I mean, because there were so many different Friday the 13th. They could have had any female in that role. You know what I mean? And
Oh my god, yes. I mean, I would have loved that. I mean, what is the only one we got?
Reg,
Reggie? Reggie the
yes, in
Reckless?
part five, I love it.
I mean, that's the only one I can think of that survived
Yeah,
who is for any diversity ever. And I think only because he was a kid,
yeah,
which probably.
I think you're right. I think, yeah, Reggie was the only one really to survive that was, a minority in the cast. Like, I mean, I know they had like minorities in the cast, but they pretty much were all knocked off.
Yeah, was it? I think New Tina. Was it New Blood?
Yeah, New Blood.
I think there's a
Yeah,
couple, but then
yeah,
they're
they end up
dead.
dying. And I remember hearing, and this is actually in my Camp Crystal Lake Memories book. One of the actresses was talking about how because they filmed part 7 in Alabama, and
No
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, that one was filmed in Alabama,
Oh.
and obviously it was kind of like in the secluded part because they're kind of like in the woods and such. But they said like when they
Yes.
weren't filming, they would all kind of like go into town and hang out. But she was saying how those two characters, the two black actors, when they would go out to places, they would get
Oh.
like these like looks from people, and it just kind of like really let them know like where they were. Like it was just like they just talked about how that was just like uncomfortable because these were actors from L.A. who had to fly out to for her very
Yes.
open and not really used to like all that. So they said it was even weird for them, like like wow, like they we're here just making this movie, but there are just people there who have their as I call it dinosaur ways
That's
about
the
things.
truth. It should be
Yeah.
extinct.
So it's like, I just thought that was like, wow,
Because I feel like a lot of these were filmed in New Jersey from what I've
Yeah,
seen.
the first two were New Jersey, part 3, 4, and 5 were California, part 6,
Ooh.
part 6 was Georgia, part 7 was Alabama.
Weird they could have just stayed in
Yeah,
Georgia.
they went all over filming these. And then what was it? Part 8 was Canada and New York, and then part 9 went back to LA, and then obviously, Jason X was in space. So, no.
Which was actually
Right.
space.
No, actually, I think they did film that one in Canada too, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I think they did film that.
I feel like that was when everything, I feel like in the 2000s, early 2000s, late
Mhm.
90s, when everything shifted to
Yeah,
Canada, kind of like all the
yeah,
productions.
that's
It's
really
like,
true.
it could pass for New York,
Yeah,
California,
I
evidently,
know. Everywhere
everywhere.
was filmed. But yeah, I mean, you're right. As soon as now that you mention it, yeah, a lot of them were. Because I think Halloween Resurrection was filmed in Canada, and that was like 2002. Freddy versus Jason was
That is so
'03, and that was Canada. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Oh man.
there's that whole thing that's going on with the rights. If we ever get another
Oh
sequel,
man, I've always been I'm hoping they do another sequel because Fridays are just like they're just fun. I mean, I always call them they're fun Friday movies, like late Friday movies. Like what I mean? I just love
yes.
watching them on a Friday. Like they're just. I actually had just watched part 1 again recently. And I hadn't watched it in a while, and it's just when you just go back to them, it's just like man, like man, this is where it started. Like this is like the beginning of this literally this decades long nightmare for these characters.
And they had no idea. Like to think like, it starts with Pamela and then it ends with Jason, and then the Jason we get
Right.
zombie
hmm
space.
I mean, the character of Jason is like I feel like he has been everywhere and almost has done like everything.
Arsenio Hall, right? Into
Yeah,
it.
right. I love that. Oh man. I mean, each one was unique. I mean, each entry was unique in its own right. Character types and this story wise, and each person that played Jason. Cause Richard Brooker is actually my favorite portrayal of Jason, which is from part 3. And I actually did get to meet him before he passed away,
Oh,
because I think
wonderful.
he is the only Jason to have passed away so far. I'm thinking, right? Yeah, I think he's the only one. And I met him back in 2009.
What a world, another world
Right,
away. What
right.
simpler times again.
He was just so laid back, so cool. Like, I just talked to him. I told him that, Friday 3 is my favorite. He was my favorite Jason. And, he took the picture and he's like, I'm basically like not even at his shoulders. He's so tall. I'm only like 5'6". So he was like a giant.
They must be all so giant. You mentioned earlier, again off camera, you guys missed a great conversation. Anthony has met every actor who's portrayed Jason, you were
Yes.
saying. So they're all massive, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I mean,
They are.
Kane, I'm sure, is
Yeah. Oh man.
humongous.
If you ever meet him, he usually when you do a picture with him, he'll just instantly wrap his hands around your throat. And I will see him before I had actually met him the first time. I was thinking like, oh, that's fun. Like, yeah, just act like you're all like getting stoked. But then when you actually did it, dude, when I say like when I had the picture, my eyes are I was like, I'm not even like trying to be like funny or act. I mean, he was. I was like, like, and then they took the picture. I was like, and they're like, oh, that was a good one. I said, yeah, that was real.
It was because I couldn't breathe.
I mean, he was really. I said, I'm like, like man, like I was like, man, I need some water after this. Like, I'm like, jeez. I said, yeah, you really went out loud on that.
Once that's over, does he switch off? Does he turn into like a normal conversation, or is he always in that mode of I'm in this Jason mode? I'm this.
Honestly, like when you're just talking to him, you're just talking to him, and it's just like like talking to anybody else, and then it's like time for that picture, and then it's like
And it's
it's
all
all over.
off.
And then once the picture's over, then it's like back to normal. I'm just like, woo! I said, man.
I wonder if anyone he starts signing like waivers before you meet him, just in case you pass out.
Oh man, it makes for. I mean, it makes for good pictures, though. I will say that.
Thank you.
What are you doing,
Thank
Dad?
you, thank you.
Sleeping in the middle of the road.
You are indeed all of you kind and generous young people. Look upon what His grace has brought unto me.
What is that?
I found this today. There were other parts of the body,
That's an eyeball!
but He said to me He wanted me to have this. Yes, He wanted me to warn you. Look upon this omen and go back from whence ye came. I have warned thee. I have warned thee.
One of the things that happened in this movie, Anthony, is what would you call him? I call him the new Crazy Ralph. It's that guy that you had mentioned that was almost run over. He's holding an eyeball in a bag. That's just some crazy guy that they just wanted to shove an eyeball at the camera.
Yeah.
You know,
Honestly, felt it was more for like just stuff for the plot. I think he was meant to be sort of Crazy Ralph-esque. Since Crazy Ralph was often, part two. I felt like they needed like kind of like that, foreshadowing character, he said, look what
yes.
His grace has brought on to me, like just he's just really like just kind of like out there, and so yeah, I felt like he was more of like I said, more of a foreshadow character. Like, I mean, we all know as the audience that like, okay, yeah, they're already in for it, and like this is extra,
Yeah.
like trying to let you know, like, okay, turn back. So
Yeah, if this wasn't enough for you, this man in the road with his
right,
eyeball.
and still trying to always figure out where he got that eyeball from. Like, I don't know if it was like human or if it was animal, and
Yeah.
I never knew. I don't know if he had went to the store where the two were killed, and maybe before the police had got there, just like I
Oh,
just
yeah, that. What did you think of that opening scene with that couple, with that guy in that convenience
uh,
store, and he's just eating everything off the shelves
I
and
love those
drinking this.
characters, man. Oh my god, they're just like so fun. Like that's what I love about the '80s. It's like they got these people who look like those type of characters. That's like nowadays,
Yes,
it's like they always
yes,
get like some either handsome guy or beautiful girl and just kind of down them a little bit by like
yes.
putting like some makeup on them and all this. But back then they actually got people who you would really like think like, I mean, if I walked in, I feel like if I was somewhere in a rural place and went to a store, I would see them. Like I was like, yes, that makes sense. I would see
Yes.
this couple there. Like,
And that rabbit would be eating the lettuce and everything in there. And I think that's a great opening just to even set up, like we were saying, the news earlier, showing what had
right.
happened.
And I love that. I love when you go into a new movie and then it really correlates to the old, like to where we came from, as opposed to
Yes,
like you go
yes.
into the next one, then there's like really like no mention of like the last one. You know what I mean? I feel like it really blends nicely. Like, I really like when films do that. Like, kind of like how even though Nancy wasn't in Nightmare 2, they had her diary. So it kind of like she was there a little
Yes.
bit, and then it kind of helped the new
Yes.
characters. And then like you go into part three, and then Nancy comes back really, and then like she's able to bridge in everything from part one to part two. And
I just wish it didn't end like that.
oh
For
gosh,
Nancy.
let's not even go there.
Right? Because it's so like, oh, like why couldn't she just survive one more
Man,
and
I
then
know. I know it was Wes. I think he wanted to kind of, because I think at that point they really did think the part three was going to be it. And I think that, Wes was kind of like saying, because he didn't really have the reins of the, kind of like, let's put the character to rest. But his original ending was far, to me, superior than the theatrical version that we got. Because in that version, Nancy wasn't tricked.
ooh.
Freddie does glamour himself, but as he's going in, like she steps back and she's like, "You're not my father." she realizes, and then he realizes, and Freddie like basically turns back, and then like him and Nancy basically fight to the death, not where he tricks her. And I said that's more, if she had to go, I said that was more fitting to Nancy than what we got. But
Yes.
when the other two writers came in, they were like, they did it mostly for shock factor, like Nancy got stabbed, like, oh, like, as opposed to it being like a real clicking in with the story. That's why, Wes Craven, he will always be my favorite writer director, because he really knows how to tell story. So, and plus I always love that he brought us New Nightmare even after part 3, so then that brought her back to me. So
Yes, you got to see.
always
Yes.
thankful for New Nightmare. So
That really is one of those movies that were just amazing to
yes.
have, and the plot that it was just that is a great movie, which I'd love to have you come back to talk about as well when we get to that.
Definitely would love to talk about that one.
At the convenience store, we see a Velcro wallet. Evidently floats later on. I never knew the Velcro wallets float, but that's good to know in the future. And we get Shelly and Vera, and they meet Fox, Loco, and
Ali. Yep.
And that whole scene, it's fun. And then Shelly backs up into the motorcycles.
Oh,
God.
man, poor guy.
It makes sense later that it sets up the plot that Chris's van, when she's trying to drive, that they took that gasoline out. So it's better than just having, the car just doesn't start.
It actually makes sense. It's not like, the car just really not starting all this, but it makes sense because they took the gas.
So I'm glad that they had that. I mean, it enabled them to have more body count as well. When they get killed. But I think it's smart things like that further a plot, and it's not just like, oh yeah, Chris, she just can't get that car to start.
But I always love that she like clicks up the little thing and it's like reserve gas. And I was like, I remember watching, I said, that was a thing. I said, they had like gas in reserve, like they could just click that up. I was like, man,
it's like, damn, she found it, because even today when I rewatched it, she got that to go.
I was like, man, just being young, I had no idea there was such a thing as reserved gas. I'm just like, man, I wish I had that like in my Honda, like.
Yeah, I wish too.
Man, that would come in handy going on trips and never have to stop for gas.
That's it. It's a magical 80s thing that only happens there, I think.
I love that they had the van. I always love, because in the 80s, I always just call them the Scooby vans. Like, just like that little crew.
Yes.
And it's like, I said, that just had to be like so much. They just made it look so much fun. Like that little core group just in this van, like they're just smoking weed and just like talking.
That's when they do the reveal of the smoke coming out like it's on fire.
I'm like, that's just like, that's just like classic 80s. I mean, plus that was the early 80s too. Like, this was 82, so.
Some people have criticized and they say, like, not many people, because a lot of people, like, such as yourself, love Chris and all that. They're saying she should have really warned the other people that this was a possibility. But I feel like she did mention something happened to her, at least some of them.
Yeah. Debbie definitely knew her. Debbie and her were best friends, so like she knew, and then Andy knew.
Yes.
So people did. They did know that she was attacked, but nobody. But but it had been like 2 years.
Who could guess this, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Right. Who's guessing?
To them, that's probably just an isolated incident. And, they hadn't even heard about the events from part 2 at that point. So nobody really had any reason to be afraid. She was getting like these weird feelings because nobody else would really see them, but she was already on edge. And I always feel like when you already kind of been through something, then it's like you kind of gain another sense, and it's just kind of like certain things that you might look at harder that other people just kind of might pass up, just think like, oh, that's nothing. But then to you, because what you've been through is kind of like, maybe I need to give that a second look, or maybe maybe we shouldn't just ignore that right away.
Yes.
So I don't, like I said, she wouldn't have known that. Okay, now all of a sudden, I mean, she didn't even know who it was. So this could have been.
That's right. Yes, it was just this man.
Because if you ever notice in part 3, Jason's name is never mentioned one time. This is the only one where his name is not mentioned one time.
Right, because they don't. Yeah, right. They don't even know anything about. It's not Camp Crystal Lake. Yeah, good point, Anthony. I didn't even think of that, but yeah. It isn't mentioned. He's just this assailant.
Yep. So that's why I said part three just kind of is like set apart from like the other ones. It's kind of got like this, different feel to it. But it always cracks me up though, because you got all these. I'm like, Camp Crystal Lake must be the like world's most amendable lake. Like, I mean, you got the Jarvis family living on, you got
Yeah.
the actual campsite. You got Higgins Haven. And then in part five, you have the house for like teenagers who are going through all this traumatic stuff and
That's
rural.
right.
I'm like, geez, like Crystal Lake has
That's
everything.
right. Well, based on the old Nintendo Friday the 13th game, they had like those
Oh man,
that map around the lake that looked like a lot of places or a lot of
right,
cabins
everywhere.
everywhere.
Oh, side note, I never passed that game. Man, that game was like impossible.
And
Yeah,
anxiety. It
I felt
was.
like you had like 100 cabins and like 98 of them were like empty, and then it's like you go into like, what am I looking for in here?
You're right. And then when you got to the cabin to try to maneuver into the rooms, it just like it would keep you going over and around in a circle almost. And then Jason would just appear
Right.
sometimes.
All
Never
right, he would
die.
always get me. I'm like, I never be. It's like, is there like really a way to beat him at all? Or you just like randomly walk and just get killed? Like, I never beat that game ever.
My brother David actually beat it, but it took him
Yeah,
years. And
man.
I think you have to find a pitchfork, and it's like this whole crazy thing. And even trying to avoid his like little like punch out kind of like attacks that he swings you, I always
Crazy
died.
shit.
Yeah, that is an
Oh
impossible.
man.
Part 3. Is there anything else that stands out for you that, I mean, you made some great points. And like you said, this is one of your favorites. And it's one of these that you can keep returning to. And I bet you every time you see it, there's probably things that you think of and go, I wish, this was a continued, like you were saying earlier. Or somehow they would have mentioned, oh yeah, Higgins Haven and this happened. Or is there anything that you would have potentially done in a sequel if you had the reins of part 4 right after this? Not to put you on the
Well, no, 'cause
spot,
that's the stuff
but
I think about. Because I love fan fiction as well. Like, so I've done some of my own fan fiction.
oh, those are the
Kind of
best.
written. It wasn't like completed, but it was before I really got into like my own stories. I would kind of go into stories that I would, kind of knew and just kind of make my own like little sequels to them. Like I did it with like Nightmare, and I did some with like Halloween, and of course Friday the 13th. But of course, I took it from Friday the 13th Part 3, and it actually was Chris. She was older, and it was again her going back to Higgins Haven years later. Now she has two children, a son and a daughter, and they go back to Higgins Haven, and like they know the whole story of like what happened to her, what happened to her friends. She just goes back just trying to put it to rest. And or no, it was something, I think I wrote something where her parents were trying to sell the Higgins Haven property, and she was like handling all that, and she really didn't want to be there, but and then it kind of goes into her little backstory that she was kind of like in the kind of like asylum for a little bit, just trying to like get better. Because at the end it just kind of set it up to something was going on, like just kind of messed her mind a little bit.
Too bad she wasn't with Tommy in a future sequel. They could have met. Too
Oh
bad.
well, actually, in mine, I actually have her meeting Nancy Thompson, because if you ever read the innovative comics for Nightmare, at the end of part 1, Donald Thompson sends Nancy to the asylum because she's talking about Freddy, and he wants to like keep it quiet, and he wants to put her there to just forget about Freddy. And then she and Nancy meet, the asylum. So like they become friends, and obviously Chris gets out a little bit sooner, because the thing with Jason is people knew about that. I'm like, yeah, he was a real
Right,
a
right.
little
It's
bit, she had to, kind of find her own way, a little bit. And then, they would kind of remain friends throughout until, Nancy was killed. And then, she gets older, and then like she has her kids. And while they're there at Higgins Haven, like, they've built like, some rich kid's family has built like this nice huge cabin on the lake, and there's like this huge party going on, and her kids want to go to the party, and Chris is like reluctant, but ultimately she lets him go. And
Oh my god, this is
everything,
perfect
you know,
already. I
and then
love it.
everything, then everything happens from there, like it typically does. So
Oh my god, that could be a sequel now.
right,
Like, if we could do a continuation, that would be
right.
perfect because it's like one of those Laurie Strode, like we were saying,
Mhm,
continued. You could bring a original final girl
mhm.
back and then introduce the children and then continue it. I mean, if you
Right,
choose to, like to continue with the children, but
right.
ooh,
That's why I love fan fiction because you can just kind of do anything. But I always try to make it at least, like semi, like have it make sense. I don't want to like have it just be crazy or all this random
yes.
stuff that's happening. Like I want it to actually make sense. Like, okay, we know this story, and like, okay, now we have this extra story that goes with this. And I always just love when it picks up. Years later has gone by, and now you kind of just see how this person is now, like after all this. So that was part of my, what I did with that.
Because seeing like what it does to a person, a survivor of something like
Hmm.
this, how it ever affects you, I think that is
Hmm.
interesting. And there's so many opportunities that they could have done with these final
Right.
girls.
That's why I always say missed opportunities.
Well, maybe not. Maybe your script will be the return to Jason when the rights come.
Maybe.
Maybe,
Shoot. I know I
possibly.
gotta like find that old script, like read, like that was years ago, and I probably started doing that like back in like '05 or something. It's been so long.
Oh
Yeah.
my god! Oh my god! Now that brings me back. Oh, 5. Oh,
Oh yeah, I know. I was writing a ton of I think I had just graduated high school. Oh, and there is like a little something kind of funny is Tracy Savage, who plays Debbie, Chris's best friend. She
yes.
After she did Friday 3, she which I always thought was so funny about part 3 because it seemed like everybody kind of stopped acting not too long after they did part 3 and became like these huge like I think Dana Kimmel became a realtor. Larry Zerner became an entertainment lawyer. Tracy Savage became a journalist. Like she covered like the O.J. Simpson trial. But Rick became a chiropractor. Jeffrey Rogers became a doctor in New York. So did the woman that played Chili. She became a doctor.
So nobody stayed in the
Yeah,
in the
not. I mean, I
acting.
think like several years ago, like or not, but a few. Like I think Tracy Savage came back and did like a horror movie. Like they just had her in it or something. Maybe they've all come back and kind of did like little things, but in the grand scheme of things, they all had these like huge careers because for Tracy, like she was kind of done with acting when Friday the 13th 3 came along. And they was like, well, how about just one more, because they're gonna film it like right here before you start college. So because they were like filming it, I think like in the fall, or sorry, not in the fall, but in like the like spring, kind of like going into summer, filming Friday 3. And she's like, okay, this would be kind of be like my last movie before college, yada yada. It was called Crystal Japan because they always kept the identity of of
Oh.
every Friday the 13th had like a suit name, like and then she said when she found out what it really was, she was super excited, and which I always thought was
Thank God she was
right.
excited, not going, oh no.
Right. She was like, she said,
What did I
she
just
said when she
do?
found out, she said, I definitely want to be part of this. And it was kind of like her last movie. And then when she did their journalism thing and she would do like certain newscasts, she was actually close to my area in Dayton at one point. Because I live between Cincinnati and Dayton. It's called Middletown,
Perfect in the
yeah,
middle
two
of.
big cities, and Dayton is only like 15 minutes away, and she was part of like the Dayton like news they would have at one point. And I remember when I was a kid, I remember like her name and
So
seeing
crazy
her.
to
Then when I
think.
saw Friday 3, I said, "Wait a minute, wasn't that her?" And I would like go back, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" But being so young, I didn't like know at the time.
Of course, it's like someone you look familiar, but like, there's no way that woman in Friday's the news lady. But sure enough.
Right?
So, Anthony, did you meet Dana, who plays Chris?
No, I haven't. That's one of my
Is she not a convention person, or does she just?
she does do them. Like I've seen her at several. I just missed her because like I know she did one in Chicago one year, but I was going to another con, so I couldn't go see her. And then she did one in Arizona, which was a little, it was too far for me at that point. And I know she's done
Yeah,
random
that's a flight.
random ones throughout because I've seen her picture. People taking her, Google stuff, and you'll see her at cons. And I've seen her and Amy still doing panels together, like overseas. I think they went to one like their con
Oh
in
my
Germany,
god, that's so
but
cool.
I say these last I feel like the last one I felt like I saw her name attached to one was like 2016 maybe. It's been a while. So she's just one that, so I've met all of my top 5 heroines except for her. She's the only one I haven't met.
Okay, we're putting that out in the
I
universe.
know.
We got to get you to meet her to complete
Oh
your
man,
collection.
if I meet, that would just be like, I would have her sign my Camp Chris like Memories book. I would have her sign my Sweet 16 DVD. Everything like everything. Like I just want to like just talk to her and just like just tell her how much I love part 3 and how like she was kind of like a little bit of inspiration for one of my books. My book's Bloodshed that I wrote is actually a little like have all of my top 5 heroines ingrained into like the main heroine of that.
Oh man.
So like so far I've given it to Heather has that one. My top 5 is Heather Langenkamp, Nev Campbell,